What would it take to get you to come back to do Finn again?
In what?
I mean, I don't know if Finn is...
You ain't gonna Disney Plus me.
Damn it, Tony, damn it!
Video games have been huge for Star Wars ever since the early 80s. Back then, most filmmakers didn't have a keen interest in the gaming industry. But most filmmakers are not George Lucas. Lucas licensed off Star Wars to many video game companies, most notably Atari. He inevitably created LucasArts, which really launched Star Wars to be an elite IP within the video game industry, including popular titles like Knights of the Old Republic, Republic Commando, the classic Battlefront 2, just to name a few. However, all of that changed once Disney bought the franchise from George Lucas. LucasArts was no more, and the sole licensing rights to Star Wars video games were given to EA. EA in the first 6 years only produced 2 AAA titles, Battlefronts 1 and 2. Battlefront 1 was a game heavily criticized for its lack of content and overpriced DLC. Its successor, Battlefront 2, broke the internet on release with its predatory loot boxes and microtransactions. An EA post on Reddit still holds the record for the most disliked post in Reddit history, holding that record by almost 7 times the amount of the post in second place. But once the summer of 2018 hit, things started to change. Battlefront 2 started to win fans over with the removal of the microtransactions and the new free content. They continued to add free DLC throughout all of 2019, and in November 2019, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order was released. Developed by Respawn Games, this game surprised a lot of people. EA once said that single-player games were games of the past, so when they announced a single-player game following a young Jedi after the events of Order 66, well, to say the least, fans were a little skeptical. However, after the game's release, it was met with almost universal praise. People loved the story, people loved the characters, people loved the locations, and the game left fans begging for a sequel.
No, let me get away! Let me get away! Let me get away! Let me get away! Let me get away!
So while EA plans the future of their new Jedi video game franchise, they decided to make a smaller flight simulator game called Star Wars Squadrons, which actually comes out later this week. So with the future of the Star Wars gaming franchise somewhat unknown, I've been doing some thinking. Star Wars single-player games seem to be where most of the anticipation is. Now, while a lot of people want a story that continues the story of Cal Kestis, I thought of a story that I think would be much better. A story that has the potential to be so great that it can fix many of the problems that people have with Disney's Star Wars. A story so important that it can please fans of any Star Wars era. And this story revolves around one specific person. Now, this story will be very similar to the story of Cal Kestis. It will follow a young Jedi learning to become a Jedi and, more importantly, learning how to become a better person. So who is this mystery character? Who is this character that could potentially bring world peace and end world hunger? Well, the answer is Finn.
You serious?
Now, this may confuse a lot of people. The character of Finn and, more importantly, the actor John Boyega have been the center of some controversy recently. John Boyega recently expressed his frustrations with the franchise and how they treated his character. It seems to be an almost universal opinion that by the end of the Rise of Skywalker, Finn hadn't reached his full potential as a character. So this begs the question, why do I think that Finn would be a good character to base a whole video game around? Well, since the Rise of Skywalker made it canon that Finn is Force sensitive, the possibilities for Finn really are endless. So this video is going to be split into 2 different parts. The first part is going to be me explaining all those endless possibilities and why I think a video game around Finn is such a good idea. And the second part is going to be my pitch for a story that revolves around Finn. So let's discuss all those endless possibilities. So there are many different reasons why I feel a video game surrounding Finn would be a great choice. The biggest one being redemption. As someone who loves the sequel trilogy, I'm not going to deny the fact that I felt Finn wasn't done that well in The Last Jedi, and that he was done even worse in The Rise of Skywalker. The potential for Finn was all there in The Force Awakens. He started his story as a stormtrooper. For the first time in Star Wars, stormtroopers were humanized. We saw a battle from the perspective of what we thought were just simple, mindless drones. However, we got a story where this stormtrooper defected and decided to help save the galaxy from the First Order, inevitably going toe-to-toe in a lightsaber duel with one of the faces of the organization he left. But the next two films really didn't carry on with that wonderful story in my opinion. Creating a video game that surrounds Finn really has a chance to redeem the character. Having a story that revolves around him and not the Skywalkers gives a chance for him to really grow as a character. We can see him go through new challenges, dig deeper into his personality, and see what being Force sensitive really means to Finn. And the other aspect of redemption that revolves around Finn has to do with the racial aspect. John Boyega has been a major advocate for Black Lives Matter in the past few months, and he was hurt by the fact that a black character was sidelined in the films. Lucasfilm has a chance to honor him by creating the first Star Wars video game where a black character is the main character. Now, in the Star Wars universe, racism isn't really a thing when it comes to people of color. That's usually something that's reserved for aliens, again, in the universe. So racism may be something that is hard to address inside Star Wars. But I do think regardless of that, having a game with the first black actor front and center would be a huge step. Maybe include Janna and Lando as well. I mean, they are around after the events of the Rise of Skywalker as well. I'm not saying these other characters have to be there just because they're black, but they are always available. So why else do I think Finn would make such a good protagonist in a Star Wars video game? Well, not only is Finn Force sensitive, but he's also untrained. In a lot of these games where the protagonist is some sort of Jedi, a big part of the game is the character on a journey of becoming stronger in the Force. Throughout the game, the character will learn new abilities that are necessary in the endgame. Sometimes though, that does lead to a few narrative problems. What if you're telling a story where when the story begins, the main character is already a Jedi? Then there's usually some sort of event that causes the character to regress in his or her training, so throughout the game they can relearn those abilities. In the case of Finn, he has no training to start the game. This provides a fresh take on the Jedi learning new abilities story in the game. Throughout the game, Finn can learn new abilities. He can start the game learning simple abilities like Force pull or push, and by the end of the game he can have more advanced skills. Maybe he can have his own unique skill, like Rey has Force healing, so Finn could hopefully have a skill that separates him from other Jedi as well. Now when it comes to saber combat, he already has some experience. I mean, we have seen him use a lightsaber before, so there's already somewhat of a foundation there. They could explain this away by saying Rey found another lightsaber while doing some Jedi missions or something. Maybe at some point during the game, Finn will go on a mission to make his own lightsaber. Now he can't go to Ilum since we know that is indeed Starkiller Base, but maybe he can go to a new planet that has Kyber crystals. But the point is, Finn going on a journey of becoming a Jedi not only redeems his character, assuming it is done right, but it also provides a fresh take on the story of a young Jedi. Now, besides directly affecting Finn, how else is this story a good idea? Well, it provides a chance to expand on some of the other characters in the sequel trilogy as well. If Finn is untrained and he needs a teacher, why not have Rey train him? I can see this dynamic being very similar to the dynamic between Ezra and Kanan if you ignore the age. Rey is a Jedi, sure, but she only just became a Jedi depending on when this game would take place. She still has a lot to learn, so is she ready to teach someone else? I'm not entirely sure. The struggle between teacher and student can be a new take on the relationship between Rey and Finn. We never play as Sarah in Fallen Order, but she was fleshed out excellently and we really got to know her. And I know many people along with myself are begging for more stories with Rey, so even though she won't be the main character herself, we will still get more Rey content. By the way, I made a 2.5 hour long video on why Rey is not a Mary Sue. So if that's something you're interested in, definitely go check that out. Now, I wouldn't go this route myself, but if the storytellers could do this in a good way, then there is the possibility that you could have a relationship between Rey and Finn. The thought of a relationship between these two was a thing all the way back when The Force Awakens came out, so here it could definitely be a possibility. Again, I wouldn't do this, but it is a possibility. But one of the biggest reasons I want this relationship to be expanded upon has to do with the Rise of Skywalker. In The Force Awakens, I was really sold on their relationship. They seemed like two people who genuinely cared for each other, but in The Rise of Skywalker, it really does seem like it's just a one-way relationship. Finn is always going out of his way to check on Rey and show her that he cares, but Rey seems to not really care for Finn in this movie. She kind of just treats Finn like he's someone that's on the mission with her. This may be a hot take, but I actually like that dynamic between Rey and Finn in The Last Jedi more than The Rise of Skywalker, and they only have one scene together in that movie and they don't even say anything. Yeah, Finn is making a lot of decisions based on Rey in The Last Jedi, but at least on a few occasions, Rey shows that she still really cares for him. Maybe in this game, Rey is the one screaming for Finn all the time. It would definitely be a fresh take, that's for sure. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I really don't like their relationship in The Rise of Skywalker. And I think this game has the potential to fix that. Now, besides Rey, you can expand on all the other characters a little bit as well. Finn and Poe already have a good relationship, but maybe make Poe the secondary character instead of Rey. If Lucasfilm really wants to, they could make these two end up together as well. It's definitely something that was hinted at in the film, so you wouldn't have to do too much work there. Maybe he can end up with Janna, or a new character, or maybe no one. Now, I'm not suggesting this because I think Finn has to be in a relationship, but I do like the aspect of Finn being in one. I do want another story where a Jedi is in love with someone because I want these stories to show that love can be a strength for the Jedi, proving the dogma of the Jedi from the prequels wrong. Maybe it doesn't have to be this specific story, but at some point I would like to see another story where a Jedi loves someone else. Now, regardless of who Finn may or may not end up with, the point is that Finn will be the main focus of this story. I just want to make sure that is clear. Now, besides expanding characters, how else is this story a good idea? Well, maybe we can finally get some of that sequel trilogy world building we've all been looking for. For me, the world building of the sequels was always the weakest part. Even though I have read books and reference guides that do help me understand what's really going on in the galaxy during the sequel era, there is no denying that in the films, it did a terrible job with this. To this day, people still don't really understand the dynamic between the First Order and the Resistance. What better way to expand upon this than a 20+ hour video game? Granted, this game will take place after the Rise of Skywalker, so the galaxy won't be the same as it was during the trilogy, but they could still help explain things better. After the Rise of Skywalker, it's not 100% clear whether or not the war is over. Instead of ending the war 1 year later like they decided to do with the Galactic Civil War, maybe let the war last a few years. The First Order can still be around with the galaxy rising up. Instead of a rebellion, the war can be more of an even fight between the First Order and the Resistance. Even without Palpatine's Death Star destroyers, the First Order still does have a large navy, regardless of what happens. I really hope that the war with the First Order didn't end with the Rise of Skywalker. That would mean that in the Star Wars chronology, the war only lasted 1 year. Also, can we get an official name for the war of the sequel era? Like the prequels had the Clone Wars, the originals had the Galactic Civil War. What is the sequels? Just name it like the Second Galactic Civil War or something basic like that. I mean, that's what it is basically. Maybe in this game we can go to some new worlds. Maybe we can go to some old worlds like Coruscant. See what the average person thinks of the conflict of the First Order. Maybe introduce a little politics. Fallen Order was a story with a small group of people. Do something unique here. Maybe a story that's much larger in scale. But yeah, this concept for a story can definitely better the world building of the sequels infinitely, and I would really love that. So those are all my general ideas for this topic. I just think if you keep in mind all the possibilities that I just mentioned, there are an infinite number of stories that can be told, and hopefully these stories would make people more fond of the sequel trilogy. The Clone Wars show made people appreciate the prequels more, so maybe this game will allow people to appreciate the sequels more. Moving on from some simple possibilities, I want to discuss my actual story. Now, I don't have a full-on script really, or even some detailed ideas. These are just some ideas I had that I threw together that I think could make a decent story. So think of this story as a very, very rough draft. Now, this may excite a lot of people, this may make a lot of people upset, but the foundation for my story is actually going to be based off of Duel of the Fates. If you don't know what Duel of the Fates is, it was the original episode 9. It was written by a man named Colin Trevorrow before he was fired and replaced by J.J. Abrams. A few months back, like in January, a whole script leaked of the original Duel of the Fates, and there's plenty of videos on it, so if you want to learn more about the topic, then you can go check out one of those videos. The parts of this story that I will cherry pick obviously are the parts that revolve around Finn. A big part of Duel of the Fates does revolve around Rey and Kylo Ren, but I'm going to completely ignore those parts because for one, I'm not a big fan of those parts, and two, well, Kylo Ren is dead unfortunately, so I can't really have that part of the story in my video game anyway. But I really do think the part of the story that revolves around Finn is very unique and very interesting, and I quite like it. Also, when I present my story, think of it as a linear type of video game. I haven't really thought through like what all the missions would be or what all the boss fights would be. I just have this story in my head that I want to share. So without a further ado, here is my pitch for my video game on Finn. So the story begins, and it has been about 1 year since the events of the Rise of Skywalker. The war between the First Order and now whatever the Resistance is called is still going on. However, with the galaxy rising up a year ago in the timeline, it's more of an even fight between the two. On the planet Kuwait, there's a very important station where the First Order ships are being built. Our main crew from the sequel trilogy, Rey, Finn, Poe, Rose, and BB-8, are together and are undercover along with some of the locals. It's similar to the opening of Captain America's Civil War, if you've ever seen that movie. They are there because they're trying to blow up a fuel depot that would result in the destruction of the entire station. Rey is carrying with her her yellow lightsaber, and Finn has a green lightsaber. After some sneaky maneuvering, they manage to sneak their way into the station and blow it up. Again, I'm not really going into specifics here. This would be the portion of the game where you kind of just learn the basics of the game and such. After the station blows up, we see a large portion of the Resistance fleet arrive. A giant space battle ensues, and our main crew is on the ground fighting some stormtroopers. The crew is on its way to a rendezvous point so they can escape the planet. However, Finn is struggling with this mission because back during his stormtrooper days, he once worked on this station, so all he could think about are some memories of his time here and the people he worked with. Throughout the game, Finn has these flashbacks to his time with the First Order. In this flashback, we get to see him and his old squad mates, and we see they are very close. Now back to the mission. Their escape plan fails and they're forced to improvise. Poe's cocky self suggests that they steal a Star Destroyer that is still docked at the station. After some thought, they all agree and they fight their way into the Star Destroyer. After some random explosion or something, Finn gets separated from the crew and he's all alone. While by himself, he runs into a red stormtrooper with a lot of cybernetics. It's kind of similar to Cardinal from the Phasma book if you've ever read it before, but kind of like a cyborg. We find out it was one of Finn's old squad mates, who wasn't a cyborg before when Finn was still part of the First Order. Just for the sake of this video, his name will be Andrew. He has two swords that are similar to the ones the Praetorian Guards have in The Last Jedi, but for some reason Andrew is pissed, and after a brief chat the two fight. Finn loses the fight because he's not that good with a lightsaber, but Rey is able to save Finn just in time and Andrew makes a quick escape. The crew successfully takes off and escapes the battle in a Star Destroyer. They arrive back at the Resistance base, which is a larger base, but it doesn't represent a planet city or something. It's not their main headquarters, but it's a Resistance base nonetheless. Since they have a bunch of First Order people in captivity, considering they just stole a Star Destroyer, the crew and Resistance High Command debate as to what to do with them. Finn pleads to them that their lives should be spared, however the Council disagrees. After some heavy debate, the High Command or Council or whatever agrees and imprisons the First Order troopers. Now Finn does some training with Rey, where he expresses his feelings on the most recent mission and how hard it was for him to kill people he previously knew. This would be like the mission in Fallen Order where Cal just wanders around Bogano doing stuff.
Fuck off. Fuck you! You got me kidding me!
The Resistance is able to gather some valuable intel from the Star Destroyer, and they learn about the condition of Coruscant. Coruscant is currently one of the last strongholds of the First Order, and the Resistance has been trying to recapture it ever since the Rise of Skywalker. Coruscant is in terrible condition. It is dirty, people are poor, and it does not resemble the planet we saw in the prequels. We learn that the First Order has blocked all off-planet communication, not just on Coruscant, but on other planets too. However, there is a station on Coruscant that would be able to send signals out to the other planets, regardless of the jammer. To the citizens of Coruscant and these other planets, they believe the First Order is still reigning supreme in the galaxy, and that there is no hope for them. Before they can discuss any future plans, the First Order arrives with a huge fleet, and a space battle begins, and there is a big battle. Some of the forces arrive on the ground, and there's a big battle on the ground too. We find out that the First Order found their base because of the Star Destroyer Rey, Finn, and Poe brought with them. On the ground battle, Rey is captured along with many of the other Resistance troops. And for those who were not captured, they were forced to retreat back to the main Resistance planet, which is one of the major systems. After the retreat, Finn and crew discuss that they need to rescue Rey because she's the only Jedi the Resistance has. Finn doesn't feel he is strong enough and that he still needs Rey for more training. They suspect that Rey was taken to Coruscant because it is the main base for the First Order. They agree to a plan to infiltrate the planet similar to the end of Rogue One. They also happen to have a First Order ship that would allow them entry into Coruscant. So the next mission of the game would simply just be them on Coruscant undercover and inevitably finding their way to Rey. I don't really want to go into the details here because again, I'm not writing a whole script, just a very brief treatment. But while on Coruscant, they do get a deep look into the underworld of Coruscant and how poor everything seems to be. Finn has talks with the citizens and he feels very sympathetic. On their way to save Rey, Finn runs into Andrew again, and we learn that he was tortured after Finn defected. After Finn defected, the other members of his squad defected too, except for Andrew. The First Order assumed that Andrew somehow aided in their defection and was tortured for some information he could not provide. I know it's a weak motivation, but if I were to write out a script, I could definitely be more specific. After Finn and Andrew fight, Finn still cannot beat him, but he is able to escape Andrew. They are able to save Rey and they make an attempt to leave the planet. After some more fighting, they are back at the transport and are ready to leave. Before they leave the planet, however, Finn decides that he wants to stay on the planet. He wants to be able to send a signal to the other planets that the First Order can be beaten. His reasoning is that he doesn't want people to end up fighting for the First Order like he had to. Rey wants to stay, but Finn pleads to her that she needs to return to the Resistance base because she is more important. So everyone leaves and Finn remains on the planet and blends in with all the citizens of Coruscant. On Coruscant, he runs into a stormtrooper and captures him or her. Again, for the sake of this video, I'll just name this stormtrooper Krista. He talks to Krista and she recognizes Finn as the famous First Order traitor. He's able to convince her about the evils of the First Order after learning about how unhappy she is being a stormtrooper. She inevitably agrees to a plan to help Finn reach the beacon and try to activate the signal to send a message to the other planets. Krista leads Finn to a small rebel cell on Coruscant that agrees to help Finn in his mission to activate the signal. I am really skipping through a lot of the plot here, I know, but again, this is just what I want to happen on the most basic level. You could probably make this whole part like 2 or 3 missions. So they go on the mission to turn on the signal. Again, I'm gonna skip through the specifics, but they do inevitably manage to turn on the signal. Finn and the rest of them are captured, however, by Andrew and are taken to a prison. Finn there is interrogated by Andrew, where he learns more about Andrew's motivations and such. The First Order decides to have a public execution for this rebel cell and Finn to demonstrate what happens when you defy the First Order. While at the public execution, the citizens start to revolt and are able to save Finn and the others. The reason the citizens are revolting is because of Finn's message. They learn that they and the Resistance have a chance. While the citizens do not have the same weapons of the First Order, they do have significantly more people. So planet-wide revolt happens because of Finn's message and a big battle ensues. Because Finn was able to send out the message, the Resistance arrives and there's another large battle. Meanwhile, on Coruscant, Finn and some of the others try to storm the Senate area because that is where most of the First Order leaders are. He gets there and runs into Andrew. Again, they have another fight, but this time Finn wins, disabling Andrew. Finn refuses to kill Andrew because of all the pain that Finn caused him. He lets Andrew escape, and the citizens of Coruscant successfully manage to take control of the Senate chamber and all the First Order leaders. By the end of the battle, Coruscant has now been recaptured and now belongs to the Resistance. He meets back up with Rey and friends, and that is the end of the story. I really hope my story didn't suck too much. If I really wanted to, I would love to sit down and try and plot out this story and plot out Finn's character arc more and just make it a much more fleshed out story that would be perfect for this kind of video game. But I do think I laid the foundation for a story that is fairly unique and could be really good. Now, regardless of whoever watches this video or whoever hears this idea, this game is probably never going to happen. And the main reason is because I highly doubt that John Boyega would ever want to return to this character. It is unfortunate to see what happened with him and how unhappy he is with Star Wars right now, but that's the reality of the situation. Disney does always have the option to recast Finn, because regardless of whoever voices him, they still probably own the rights to using Finn's face and body for the game, so it wouldn't really matter, you would just hear a different voice. But regardless of all that, this is my pitch for what could be the next best Star Wars video game. This game can bring redemption to the character of Finn, can flesh out some of the other characters, and finally provide some of that sequel trilogy world building that it desperately needs. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button if you haven't already. If you want to see more of me, then you can catch me on the Chatoween Show on Star Wars Only's channel. It's usually most Fridays, so definitely go subscribe to Star Wars Only if you haven't already. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I'll see you guys next time.